Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the cryptoverse. Today, for the first time, we have Bob Loukas on the show. I'm very honored to have Bob here. He's a very rational voice in the space. Bob, it's a pleasure to have you. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, thank you very much, Benjamin. It really is a pleasure, to be here today. Thanks for inviting me, and I'm really looking forward to having a discussion with you today.
Sounds good. So, what we generally want to do today is just talk about Bitcoin, right? Everyone's interested in Bitcoin. Bitcoin's um, going crazy right now. By the way, if you guys are watching this video, I would encourage you to first pause the video, go over to Bob Loukas' channel and subscribe. Okay, and I'll link his channel down below so that you guys can see it. But I would encourage you guys to go subscribe to him on YouTube. You should also go follow him on Twitter. He puts out amazing content. He's one of the best in the space, in my opinion. So go check him out. And Bob, I want us to jump right in. I want us to jump right into
Okay.
Bitcoin. What's our general outlook here? Can you just sort of walk us through what you're seeing in the markets for Bitcoin?
Yeah, I think many of your followers may be aware of my 4-year cycle work. Essentially, what I'm seeing here is that we are now in the latter part of what is a cyclical bull market that's part of a longer term secular bull market. Obviously, Bitcoin's now 11, 12 years in. It's been in this secular bull market for the entire 12-year period. It is in a what we call a price discovery mode. It's hit the 1 trillion market cap more recently, and I think it has a lot more room to go before we can kind of find some leveling off in terms of intrinsic value. So we're in this cyclical bull market period. It's a 4-year cycle period, and we're in this point now where I think we are just on the cusp of the next mania phase, something similar to what we saw in 2017 before a blow off top. And we've seen similar blow off tops in 2013, for example. So it's got this repetitive pattern of blowing off sort of every 4 years. And right now, I think we're in that sort of, I wouldn't call it the final phase, but clearly with the likes of Elon and Saylor and just in general, the interest from the institutional space tells me that this is too far along now in this cycle for it to kind of pull back. There will be extreme pullbacks and a lot of volatility. That's just the nature of Bitcoin in general.
Mm-hmm.
But it's now in that kind of phase where it's reached escape velocity, so to speak. And I think it's beginning now its sort of final run. That final run could be 3 months, could be 9 months, it could be even 18 months. We don't really know. That's the nature of trading and investing. Picking what an asset does over a short time frame is very difficult to do.
Right.
But when you kind of just widen the lens, look on a weekly or more importantly on a monthly or quarterly chart, you really can't see that develop.
So it's an interesting point that you said. So you mentioned the 4-year cycle. So when you say that, does it mean that we will have this sort of bear market followed by the halving, followed by a 1 to 2 year run, and where we just rinse and repeat like a recipe every single 4 years from here on out until eternity, or do you think it means something different?
Well, possibly, but at some point, that series of patterns, let's call them patterns, will not repeat. It's just not feasible for that pattern to continue on forever. Once you get to a certain market cap, that structure needs to break down. It's just not repeatable. Does that happen in the next 4-year cycle, or does it happen in the one following that one? That's where it's difficult to really determine. But no, the cycles are really, and this is one sort of misconception on at least the way I view cycles and what I've researched over many years. The cycles are really based on the lows, and the lows are kind of this resetting event that begins the next cycle. It's kind of like the seasons, right? You go through a winter where you kind of burn everything out and you get rid of all the old excess and you begin again.
Could you
And
share your
it's
screen?
really,
Could you share your screen?
Yeah, certainly.
So
Let me
let's,
see
because
if
I want people to sort of be able to visualize, um, uh, what you're talking about when we talk about Bitcoin and sort of where it is. So
yeah.
so we're talking about these moves that Bitcoin has. So yeah, walk us through some what you've seen happen with Bitcoin and yeah, just give us your general thoughts on that.
Okay, so this is a weekly. The arrows here just represent shorter time frame cycles, 60-day cycles. I think we can kind of just ignore that for now. What you see here are periods of bull market extension. At the moment, they've been sort of 3-year moves higher and then 1 year bear markets, 3 years, 1 year, sort of 3 years, and then likely 1 year. But when you move to a monthly, let me see if I can just bring that up. It's difficult because every time I go up to my tab,
Oh yeah, I know what you yeah.
the there it is. So there's the monthly. So the monthly is cleaner, and I love to look at monthly because it takes away a lot of the noise and a lot of the volatility that's encompassed in a monthly candle. But essentially, the 4-year cycles, I don't go back far enough here in price because it's on Bitstamp. But the
Right.
4-year cycles here at the moment, at least the prior two, and now it looks like the third one as well, developed in what's called a right translated fashion, meaning the top occurs well beyond the midpoint, and that's how you get the rising price nature of the cycle. So it's just normal to expect price to go higher if the majority of the time it's rising versus a shorter period declining, and that's kind of what you see here. But to say or to think that that series would continue forever essentially implies at some point a market cap that's just not sustainable or practical, reasonable to
Right.
any logical investor. At some point, the market cap of any asset class becomes important. I think when you look at Bitcoin, what's different about Bitcoin to any other asset class is the whole purpose, the whole design behind Bitcoin was for it to be money. And because it was money and it was on the open market, it was priced from when it was, pennies on the dollar. So unlike a startup or a business where it takes many years to get to the point where there's some value and then it goes IPO, for example, on the stock market, it has an initial price. When you look at that chart, you look at the initial price, but that wasn't the initial inception of that business. There was a 2-year, 5-year, 10-year period where they were building and they were building a product and gaining customers and gaining revenue. You don't see it on the price, but you do see it in Bitcoin. So people look at this and think, well, I mean, look at this chart. It's just crazy. But all you're looking at is the inception of something. But the market cap, going back to that concept, back then was so insignificant that it could support these massive moves in these 4-year cycles.
Mm.
At some point, and we're hitting that point very soon, I believe, at the 1 trillion market cap, if we get to, say, a $200,000 level in this cycle, now you're talking about, what is that? I think that's 4 to 5 trillion
Yeah.
in market cap. That's very significant. Now you're starting to compete with the market cap of gold, a
Mm-hmm.
historic asset of store of value for 2,000 years. Does it eclipse gold? Probably at some point, and that supports another move in the next 4-year cycle. But at some point, that structure needs to break down, and this is where it's important to understand that 4-year cycles are not about these peaks. They're about these lows.
Right.
And there will be a point in the future where the low, one cycle low, will actually probably be, from a price standpoint, below the prior cycle. It probably won't be in this coming 2023 or 27 cycle, but it could be in a future cycle out in 2031, 32. At some point, you kind of reach a level where there's sort of, let's call it fair value, if there is such a thing in an asset class like this. But it does peter out at some point and doesn't go on forever. So that's kind of an important point here on the 4-year cycle. But look, I think we're still early enough in the discovery phase of this new asset class, low enough from a market cap standpoint that we can support at least one more peak following this cycle to a larger peak that eclipses gold's market cap as well, before we get to a point where we probably need to see some longer term bear market. And it wouldn't be a cyclical bear market. Cyclical bear markets we had some already, right? That's what these are here, in 13 down to 15 and 17 down to the late 18 bear market low. Probably another one coming next year, in my opinion.
Right.
But at some point, we're going to see a secular bear market. And there could be many reasons and many narratives for that, whether it's government intervention and regulation, a fork, or whatever it could be. We really can't foresee what that's going to be about. But it's more likely to be about the market cap, the saturation, the finding of some type of this price discovery or fair value, and not so much about an event or a series of events. Those become narratives to support that. But I do see a secular bear market in the future at some point.
One of the things that stands out to me on this chart is and again, this is just hypothetical stuff, right? We'll have to see how things play out on the charts, but we'll have another halving in a few years, and the way you have it drawn right now could suggest that doesn't necessarily mean that the price of Bitcoin will then instantly take off again, like it has after prior halvings. But one of the things I note, and I think a lot of people might be confused about, and I've actually been guilty of this as well, is I see that you have it almost sort of looks like a double peak in a sense, right? Where it goes up, you have it going up in 2021, and then maybe a pullback in 2022. But rather than say like a long bull market, like a couple years, it almost looks like it could just be sort of like a double peak in a sense where, and I know it's not on this chart, or maybe it is on this chart. Maybe this chart does go back far enough, but basically back in 2013, there was sort of like this major blow off top, and then it had a substantial pullback. And then after that pullback, which by the way, I mean, that pullback was like 70-80%. I mean, it was a lot. But it did not stop Bitcoin from later that same year going and putting in a much higher high. So the 4-year cycle, as we're discussing here, and I think this is a great point, is actually based on the lows of Bitcoin every 4 years. And then the peaks can be shifted one way or another. So far, if we're looking at right shifted peaks, what you're suggesting, is a theoretical outcome, right? Nothing's a guarantee, but a theoretical outcome would be a right shifted peak followed by a potentially quick bear market, followed by then a left shifted peak, and then maybe a long bear market after that. Like this is sort of a hypothetical scenario. So I think this is really interesting because there's a lot of, some of the charts that I've been looking at suggest that, this cycle so far anyways is emulating 2 cycles ago more than it is the last cycle. Just how quickly things are moving up. One thing that I think is interesting this cycle, and I'm curious if you have a comment on it, is we haven't really had, I get comments on the channel of people saying things like, the days of 30%, 40%, 50% pullbacks are over. And I can't help but think, okay, this is the same thing I heard in 2017. And we've already had a 30% pullback. In fact, I know you
almost two.
Almost two. And actually you did a video on that very thing not too long ago because you saw the same sort of thing. So this is like, what do you think about this current cycle? Because we've had 30% pullbacks, but what would you say to people that are, that might think that the days of larger pullbacks are over, that institutions will not let the price of Bitcoin drop, more than a few percentage points, because it would be in their interest? Like, what would you say to say new people that might be saying things like this?
I think it's one of the most ludicrous things I've ever heard, to be honest with you. I think we'll get even more volatility, to be honest with you. I think there's this misconception that these institutions are in love with Bitcoin as much as the early adopters and the hodlers are. And I can tell you, Saylor is an exception. I can grant you that.
Right.
I know he believes in the core, proposition of Bitcoin. But, I have a lot of acquaintances and people in my network who I know represent institutional money, family offices, and so on, who are buying into Bitcoin. And I can tell you, they couldn't care less. Okay. They see an opportunity, an asymmetrical opportunity to make money. to be able to show to their investors or to their representatives that they've X% increased the portfolio in a USD nominal term and nothing else. They're not in it to hold physical Bitcoin. They don't go into it saying, I want to own 100 of these magical Bitcoins. What they say is, I have $100 million portfolio. I'm willing to allocate 10 million to that. I'm willing to risk 2 million, for example, and I'm looking for a 30, 40, $50 million return. It's all USD denominated. And once it gets to a point where they feel that risk reward has skewed enough and they've made enough, they're going to dump on the market like you wouldn't believe. And I think that is what cycles really are about. It's the ebb and flow of sentiment in general. And once the pendulum tips to one side, to an extreme, it just takes an event, a catalyst to kind of tip it. And once it tips, it's a rush to the gates, rush to the exit doors. Right. And then you start this process of cycles back and forth. But even on the shorter time frames, I mean, you're right. I got the same kind of comments. You're crazy. We're not even getting a 30% decline. Institutions won't allow it. And we did go through the longest period in Bitcoin's 11-year history without seeing a 30% decline recently. And, I kind of said on a couple of my videos, don't think that's going to last forever. It's going to come very soon. And I think literally sort of a week or two later, it happened. And I think that's just inevitable. I mean, there's just a lot of leverage, a lot of speculation in this space. And, Bitcoin's vol over 100%, and so on. And it's just, you're going to get 30% swings. I mean, that's just the nature of this asset class. And if that's going to surprise you as an investor, you're going to lose money. You're going to get shaken out. You're going to buy when everyone's getting excited because you're going to feel that you don't have enough of a position. And then you're going to get shaken out because you're going to look at your portfolio. You're going to see it down a significant amount because you got in at the wrong times, or you put too much leverage on, or too big a position that you can handle. And those 30% swings are just going to take you, and somebody's going to pick that up on the dip. And then it's just a rinse and repeat. So it's just a crazy thought that an asset class like this, with this type of historical volatility, is not going to see those types of declines.
Right, and actually that brings up I think a really good point. I mean, I've noticed a lot of new people in this space, and it makes sense, right? I mean, the price is going up. It's an attractive thing for a lot of people to come into the space, but we know, I mean, the market is relatively heated right now. It's up almost 6x since October. I mean, Bitcoin is, anyways. But we also know that it can stay heated for a long time.
Right.
What would you suggest, like, for someone new coming into the space? Because these are questions I get all the time. For people that are new, like, how would you suggest controlling your emotions, right, in the space? Like, if you come in and you see this super volatile market that you've never experienced before, if you're used to other markets that don't drop 30% in a week. How would you say, like, the best way to navigate crypto?
Yeah, I mean, the sad reality is that if somebody's kind of new to investing, new to crypto, most likely their motivation is they want to make a lot of money because their neighbor is talking about how much money they've made.
Right.
And that's just how manias typically begin. And no matter what I say here today, is probably not going to help the vast majority of people. It's almost like trying to teach a baby not to touch a hot plate,
right?
A hot pan. It's like, you can say it all you like, but until they touch it and get burnt, that's when they're going to learn that lesson. And unfortunately, for many of the listeners, they're probably going to look back in a year or two, and at one point they would have been up a lot of money and probably given a lot of that back, similar to 2017 with the ICO boom. And I say that not in a sort of mocking way. It's just the laws, I guess, of nature in many ways. But maybe it will resonate, and to understand that this isn't an easy game. This isn't just buy. It's not TikTok where you just buy and all of a sudden you're up 10,000%.
Right.
It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of mental sort of fortitude to be able to see it through. And I think the best advice I can give is stop thinking about riches. Stop thinking about how much you're going to make. Don't look at the chart and say it's going to 200,000. So if I put X amount in, which is probably like everything you have, I'm going to have so much more. Because the reality is you're not going to be able to handle that size because it means too much to you. And when something means that much to you, it's just emotionally very difficult to carry through. Because like I said, those 30% swings, and like you agree, those 30% swings will come, and they'll come, often enough. And when you're looking at, let's just call Bitcoin at 100,000, we get a $30,000 decline, which is 30%. It's tough to ride that out when you have everything in it, and you see it down 30,000. It's very difficult, and you'll make the mistakes at the wrong times. But if you kind of pull it back, be reasonable about the risk that you take, you have probably a better chance to appreciate those declines and not be spooked and freaked by them. And if anything, see them as opportunity in the bull market, right? Because in a bull market, timing errors get corrected, but good timing is significantly rewarded. Okay, you can make mistakes in the bull market, and the bull market will save you. But buying at the right time and selling at the right time can be life-changing in many ways. So, I guess to your question, my advice would be just keep it reasonable. Stop thinking about how much you're going to make, and just focus on your position. Focus on the fact that Bitcoin is a very volatile asset.
I think it's a good point because, I think a lot of people have to deal with this. I think we saw it in the last cycle too. Is a deterministic way of thinking generally is not great in crypto. It's sort of like in 2017, if you were very deterministic and thought that Bitcoin was going to go to 25K, and it didn't, and then it took another 3 years. This is a dangerous way of thinking, right? If you think it has to do something.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, we talk about price movements, we talk about what we think will happen. But Bitcoin throws curveballs, right? It throws curveballs all the time. And, in 2013, watching it go up and then back down 70, 80%, and then back up higher, like who really could have predicted such a move before it happened, right? Like who could have predicted such a move like that to say it's going to go up several X and then drop 80% and then go back up several times from its prior top, and it's going to do it all in the same year. I think this is like, what I've learned personally, I've learned is to just be somewhat flexible on your, on outlooks to the market, and to recognize that, we think there's the momentum is with Bitcoin right now, right? Bitcoin, it's a train. It feels like it won't be stopped. But we know at some point it will pull back substantially, and it's going to scare a lot of people. And this is, I think it's great, right? I mean, managing your emotions, recognizing that there will be volatility, not only to the upside, but also to the downside. But you have to you just have to stay disciplined in your approach. I really do think this is great advice that you're giving people about how you manage these markets, just remaining flexible.
Yeah, I think it's strong opinions loosely held is it's not obviously my saying. It's a lot of people in the past have said that. So you need to have a somewhat of a bias, somewhat of a strategy, or some analysis that you're basing your trading or your investing on. But you need to be very flexible in acknowledging that maybe it wasn't right. It doesn't mean wrong. It just means that the market in the shorter time frames. I mean, look at how clean this chart is. 5 green candles, but then when you go to a daily, I mean, it's just it's all over the place.
Right.
So if you get caught up in the short term, if your objective is long term and you're looking at and you believe Bitcoin's going to be at 150, 250, 300, 400 over the next 12 months, 24, 36 months, then focus your investment ideas on around that and ignore the short term. So that means, again, right position size, right amount of risk to be able to accommodate the volatility, but also accommodate the path it takes. And like you said, I mean, we've got 5 green monthly candles here. The last time, actually, interesting enough, that you pointed out this period, and here it is right here. I think that's the only time we've seen 5 green, 1, 2, here's 5 right here. Point is, but there was a big shakeout there as well. Point is that this can take multiple paths to the next top. I mean, it can shoot right up here over the next 2 months to 120. And then, like you said, it can give us that 50%, 60% shakeout and then go again
Hmm.
and form that 4-year cycle top before moving lower. Or it can just pull back right now. Again, it has multiple paths to go up there. And if you think investing is about predicting the absolute path of price, then that's more ego talking. That's more about you wanting to be right about the price, the path it takes, and not focusing on really the investment itself and the objectives of what you're trying to do here. So you need to be flexible, but again, you need to have a strong opinion that you can drop quickly and say to yourself, okay, what's the market doing now? It's doing something different. Am I ready for this? Does my plan accommodate this? If not, what do I need to change? So those thoughts are very important.
Right, and I think like your strategy is actually fairly similar to mine, right? In terms of identifying the accumulation sort of phase, right? The bear market, the time when most people don't want to buy. It's not cool to buy, and
Yep.
most your friends might even be asking you, so how's your Bitcoin position to, right? This is the time where it's hard to buy for a lot of people, but like if you look at say your strategy and looking at these green arrows that you have pointing out lows, and I know you've been discussing it on your channel for a long time, like that's the strategy, right? And then we can discuss the path to whatever the new cycle peak will be, but the main strategy was getting in at a relatively cool time in the market, and then being somewhat flexible with the exact path it takes, right? I mean, I
Yeah.
mean, right now we know Bitcoin's it's near. I mean, it's at 56K, 57K. At this rate, I mean, if the slope remains the same, it's not going to take too much longer for us to hit six figures. But at the same time, if we had a substantial pullback and consolidated for a few months, we could look back to the last cycle and see several times where we would consolidate for a few months before trending higher. So I think this is a great outlook to have, right? Having a strategy, but then being somewhat flexible in how we manage it as we sort of navigate the cycle.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's all about not responding to the noise of the market. And especially in this day and age with social media and how connected we are, it is very easy to fall into that trap. And to your point, if somebody's coming into the space now, it's because they're hearing about it from others. And that's historically not a good time. Even though I think it's early enough where there's opportunity, it's not early. Okay.
Right.
With 10x off the bottom, there's room ahead. But to your point, yeah, I mean, I was buying, I bought only 3 tranches this last 4-year cycle. And one was near the bottom here. One was around, I think it was September, October, because if you look at this monthly chart, we had this kind of surprise move, and then we had a 3 to 4 month consolidation. I thought that September hit on the 10-month moving average around, I think it was around 9,000, was a great place to get in. And then we subsequently had that crash, that March crash.
Yeah.
For me, that was, a confidence in the 4-year cycle when I bought my kind of third tranche right at that bottom there or near that bottom, because it was, from my perspective, the right time in the cycle to get in.
Right.
But I sold some at 28, and I got a lot of people sort of say, "How can you sell Bitcoin at 28,000 if it's going to 200?" Yeah, I know I think it's going to 200,000, but I want to be able to comfortably hold a really big open profit position,
Right.
and by covering my initial investment, I sleep comfortably at night. And I'm in early enough where 30% shakeouts, they don't bother me, because the absolute worst case now is, this market tops out and gives us very clear bear market kind of signals. And I can't tell you exactly what line that would be, but it's certainly above 20,000. So my worst case is, I'm going to be either getting out or scaling out at some point if we get a bear market surprise. But yeah,
what I think
yeah,
about when you say that, I think about risk, and I think this is
yeah,
what people don't consider in the market. I've, I mean, I've also, had people ask me like, well, why would you ever sell some Bitcoin? I mean, to be honest, I sold some just a few days ago. I still have, a decent amount of my Bitcoin, but the whole idea is just managing my risk, and at the end of the day, it's not necessarily about your theoretical return. I mean, it's to some degree it's about your risk adjusted return. And then I think the nice thing about taking some profits off the table occasionally, right? But leaving some potential for upside. The
Sure.
nice thing is that if we do get a correction, it can you might have an opportunity
Yeah.
that you might not otherwise would have had. One thing I noticed about you said you had three main areas where you bought last cycle at the bottom. The thing that I noticed that I think a lot of new people might not be aware of is that 2 out of 3 of those were essentially at the 200-week moving average. So 2 out of 3 of them. So the one back in late 2018, and then the one in March of 2020, we had the weekly candles basically bottomed out around the 200 week with a wick to the 300 week. But that, historically speaking, has been a great time for
Right.
and it's one of those things too. Whenever we get to a cycle peak, no one can really imagine ever going to the 200 week moving average. When we went to 19.8K in 2017, the 200 week moving average at that time was less than $3,000, and then we
Right.
slowly went to it, and then by the time we hit it, it was at $3,100. But I guess like good luck having anyone think that that's possible when we're at 19.5 to the idea that we could go back to that level. But it's something to keep in mind for the long term. The 200 week moving average right now just crossed $10,000 for the first time. I thought that was pretty remarkable, like a pretty sort of a quiet milestone that most people aren't going to recognize. But just the idea of knowing in the past that $10,000 was this crazy milestone to break, and now the 200 week moving average is above that level, I thought was pretty interesting. So I just wanted to point out that
Yeah.
two out of the three of your two out of three buys that you had were at historically that has been the best time, and even going back to the prior cycle, buying at the 200 week moving average was like the best time to buy.
Yeah. And buying down at those levels obviously is difficult to do because you're in the fire at that point, right? Everything is really bearish. Everyone is very negative. Historically, I mean, I know it's overused, but you buy blood, so to speak.
Right.
It's never true, but it has to be a bull market, an underlying secular bull market for that to really work. And of course, it so happens Bitcoin is in a secular bull market. It's been clear since its inception. So buying at those levels, especially the 2018 low, coming off a 1-year decline and 85%. I mean, for me, at that level, it really was a very simple trade to take because fundamentally at that market cap in Bitcoin's evolution, I believed it still had a long way to go. And at an 85% decline over a 12-month period where sentiment couldn't get any worse. I mean, there is just no better time than that. And similar kind of concept in March as well. But we do fool ourselves. I mean, the mind is such an important aspect to investing that is too ignored. I think newbies in particular focus far too much on technicals and chart patterns and not enough on the human making the clicks and buying and selling things. And that's such an important aspect to success. And we believe all these narratives. I mean, if you recall 2017, we had this move. We went from $900 in 6 to 9 months. We're at 20,000, and nobody believed we were across 10. But when it got to 20, suddenly everybody was like, "It's going to 100."
Yeah,
all of a sudden, it just out of nowhere, and everyone's like, "Yeah, it's going to 100." And then boom, it kind of topped. And I think you'll get the same thing eventually. And again, we don't know where. Right? Is it in 3 months' time, or is it in 13 months' time? At some point, at some number, 150, 250, 300, it's going to be extreme mania, and you're going to get people say it's going to 1 million. It's going to 1 million in the next 6 months or 9 months. And it's going to be the same repeatable kind of process. And the things we believe to support a bias or support a position that really shouldn't be in place is really what we do to ourselves. So yeah, I mean, I'm definitely very much a sentiment kind of trader. And yes, the crowd is often right for a long period of time, but when they get it wrong and when they eventually are wrong, geez, it's a bloodbath. And you want to have your pulse on the market or the tape, so to speak, and be very cognizant of what people are saying and what sort of stories they're spinning and what narratives they're talking about, because those are danger points.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, you want to be a contrarian to some point, but you can't be a contrarian too early either. That's the challenge.
Right. Like if you sell all your Bitcoin or something like,
Yeah.
at a very low level, then you're not leaving yourself enough room for the potential
Right.
upside.
Right.
But as you
You
said, right,
can't.
there's nothing wrong with taking some off the table just so you can sleep at night in case there is a correction when everyone least expects it.
Yeah, it's like a pressure cooker in your steam cooker in your head. You know, if the position is too big and the gains are too great, you risk exploding almost. So by taking some off the table, you're kind of reducing the pressure and you're banking some good profit. But it's the fear that we're not going to bank the full maximum amount of profit that stops us a lot of the time.
Right.
And then when it does correct, you didn't take some off, and then all of a sudden it's just too much to handle because you were at a higher open profit position and you fear you'll never get there again. So it's like, okay, I didn't get it, but now am I going to lose all of it? Is it all going to be gone?
Right.
And then that's when you make really poor decisions
And
in the
then you
space.
just say, okay, well, whenever it gets back to that level, I'll just sell it then, and then it never goes back.
It never goes back.
And that's the,
Yeah.
or it
And
doesn't go back for say 5 years or something, or 3 years,
right.
right?
That's the final peak. Right. That's the final peak. It's like, oh no, it's just another shakeout. But no, that's the real shakeout. That's the real one, and that's when you get caught.
Yeah, it's really hard to know when that final move is, and I've done some live streams where we captured 5% losses, and people start to get really worried really quickly, and one day it won't go back up after the correction immediately, and this is, I mean, we've seen it before. I'm sure we'll see it again. It's just
We will.
It's the way the cycle works.
Yeah, it's almost like this asset class is perfectly primed for that because, unlike a stock where there is some type of methodology to valuation, and there is none for Bitcoin. It's just all narratives. And you can almost spin any one you want, and it evolves. And those types of assets are the most prone to those types of cycles. And gold's a very similar one. That's why I love trading gold. I always have, because again, it doesn't have any underlying sort of metric that you could use for valuation, and you can attach any narrative to it to support a position. And it's very much aligned with sentiment more than anything else.
Mm-hmm. One more thing I want to touch on. We haven't discussed it yet in this video. What is your general outlook on altcoins and say like the Bitcoin dominance? So the reason I ask that is because I've sort of polled my audience, and I've always said that I think that Bitcoin is sort of a must, right? If you're navigating crypto, I can't personally imagine navigating it without Bitcoin, but I find a lot of people do navigate it without Bitcoin. Do you have any general advice or general outlook, I should say, on the rest of the cryptocurrency market besides Bitcoin? Not any individual crypto, but just in general, the everything but Bitcoin is what I'm sort of asking about.
Yeah, I think there's a multi-layered answer to this. And I think a lot of your viewers probably won't like my answer.
Mm-hmm.
But in general, I feel that most of the altcoin space is a vehicle for speculation and for making founders rich. Now, there is a lot of well-intended projects, a lot of great sort of underlying foundational technology, even the ICO sort of boom had some foundation to it that we're building upon now. And the DeFi space now, I think, is really exciting for what is to come in the future. But I think the motivation behind a lot of it is quick get rich kind of schemes or way to get sort of make money easily. If you look at traditional venture capital or traditional sort of startups, you really have to go through a period of proving your product and proving your market before you can really cash in. Most of these projects, you can simply come up with an idea, you fork some tech and you maybe change it. All of a sudden, as a founder or as an early adopter, you've made a lot of money and the project may not go anywhere. And I think a lot of people just love the idea of being able to make fast money. And that's the same for the retail and the traders in the space. Altcoins in general, I think, like the 2017 ICO craze, we're going to look back and most of these projects are going to be, I'm not going to say worthless, but a lot of them will be. And if you're using them for trading purposes, you can make a lot of money, and you probably will make a lot of money. But if you start believing in a lot of the sort of white papers and sort of swallowing those hook, line, and sinker, and holding a position like it's an investment, I think you are going to be surprised in not a good way as well, for the most part. Excuse me.
I generally agree with that, actually. I've often said, right, don't marry an altcoin. Don't get attached to an altcoin or anything, because we've seen what happens. We saw what happened in 2017. Yes, altcoins gave crazy gains, but they also, a lot of them lost 98% or more.
Right.
And I think a lot of people don't necessarily consider the downside risk with altcoins, and then they just throw all their money into it at sometimes the worst possible time, and then they watch that money essentially evaporate right in front of their eyes. And one thing I've noticed with altcoins too is that, and I think a common misconception, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it, but there are a lot of coins that did well in 2013 that then didn't do anything in 2017. And I think there's a lot of people that think that their altcoin from 2017, it's only a matter of time before it goes to its prior all-time high that it hit in, say, 2017, 2018. But, I mean, there's a decent chance they never make it back to those levels, right? There's no guarantee.
Right, right.
And so I think this is and this is why I say, never marry an altcoin. And it's also why I really like taking profits on altcoins. If I'm taking profits on Bitcoin, I sometimes... it can be hard to do sometimes, right? Because I really do believe in where Bitcoin is headed, but I still have to do it to manage my risk. I enjoy taking profits on altcoins, and a lot of times, whether I'm converting it back to USD or whether I'm converting it back to Bitcoin, it feels good knowing that I made that trade, and that if in the future that altcoin goes to zero, it's not going to change the fact that I was able to to flip it in that time period and have it work out.
Definitely a good point. I was just looking through a lot of altcoins for my report on Bitcoin Live. One very clear repeating sort of price action or structure that I see a lot is you get this accumulation phase in an altcoin over a short period of time, and you get this massive spike, and then followed by a second sort of spike, and that's when you see it appear on social media, and then you get this massive retracement all the way back to the breakout point, and the decline 50, 60, 70%. And normally it's the retail folks who got in because they heard it on social media or some Discord channel too late, and they're riding it all the way back. And to support that position, they believe the narrative behind the project. And again, narrative may be well intended and may in the future be successful, but most of them are not going to be. They're not unique in any certain way,
right?
And they're not revolutionary. And again, to your other point, 2013 coins didn't do anything in 17. Most of the 17 coins haven't done a whole lot in this period. Mm-hmm. But even if you look at the DeFi space and you go to the initial coins we had that August peak, mm-hmm. in August 2020 peak in a lot of the DeFi coins. If you look at a lot of those charts, most of them haven't done anything in the last 3 or 4 months, or very little. And it's been the new entrants in the DeFi space over the last 4 months that have done really well. And it's just this rotation. It just tells me that speculators are just chasing the next idea, the next coin, and it's just all about the money. Even though they'll tell you it's the APY and everything else, it's not. Nobody's in it for the yield. I mean, come on, let's be serious. They're in it for the appreciation of the coin. So, yeah, definitely. If you're holding an altcoin and it's up like 400% in 2 weeks, take the damn profit. Yeah. If you really believe in it, keep 10% of it, keep 20% of it, get all your money back, bank some profit on top, and then take an investment position if you so strongly believe, because you will be rewarded anyway on a decent size, small position, and make that position 2% of your portfolio, 3% of your portfolio. And if it goes to zero eventually, then it's like an expensive trade, one trade. You lost 2% of your portfolio. But if it does that 100x from then on, you're still sitting really pretty. So again, it goes back to that Bitcoin analogy where it's how big is your position and can you weather the volatility? The same absolutely applies in the altcoin space. Take your profit in the short term, and if you believe in it long term, have a small, reasonable position and be okay with the outcome that
Right.
comes from there.
Well, also, I think that, and we'll wrap it up after this. I think that's a great point because, um, take some profits, right, but leave some on the table potentially if you really do believe in the long term vision. It's sort of similar to the
Yeah.
idea of taking, well, I mean, everyone knows what DCA into the market is, right? I mean, if you said you bought three separate times, um, you could say three separate entries into the market. But so many people, when they think about exiting the market, they think about it as like all or nothing, right? It's like you either sell your entire position, or if you sell any of it and then it keeps going up, then you made a bad decision, right? But in the same way that people go into the market, which is somewhat, systematically, and it's not like everyone puts all their USD into the portfolio on one single day in the bear market for the most part, and then just watches it go up, and then they sell everything at the peak, right? That's not how it
Right.
works. So that's the idea. I mean, I think that's a great idea, and I think a lot of people would do well to take that point to heart. Is that you can always systematically offset your risk, whether it's in altcoins or Bitcoin. But if you really believe in where it could be headed in the future, you could always keep a percentage on the table so that you still have the upside potential while mitigating the downside risk.
Yeah, and it goes back to everybody trying to make an absolute killing and thinking that this is the only opportunity in their whole lives to get rich. Otherwise, they'll be working a 9 to 5 job for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
And that sort of mentality is really set up for failure. And it's also this thought that you're going to time the absolute top and sell everything you have at the top, and that's going to be great. That's not going to happen. I can tell you now. Somebody will get lucky, and every dog has his day, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is, you just need to be content with great profits. And the earlier you can get into a new cycle, a bull cycle, the more freedom you have to be able to just scale out at some point and keep enough exposure in the game. But just guarantee yourself in the end, guarantee yourself in 2025 or 2026, pick a year in the future, when you look back at this, the last thing you want to be in a position where you say, I was in early, I saw the bull market, I was listening to Benjamin's videos back then, and I was all in on this, and I got nothing to show for it.
Right.
It's better to have a good amount to show for it and not be concerned about how much extra you could have made. Just guarantee yourself a good life-changing event out of this, and that's all you sort of owe yourself at this point.
And it's only ever life-changing money once you take the profits on it, right? It's not.
Yeah, that's the goal. Money in the bank. It's
Yeah. Well, Bob, it was a pleasure to have you on the show. I think that the audience is absolutely going to love it. If you're watching this, first go ahead and subscribe to this channel. Then go over to Bob's channel. We'll link his YouTube channel in the description below. I want you guys to go subscribe to him. He puts out a new video every 2 months or so, and they're very well thought out videos, very detailed. He goes through a lot of different topics each video, and I think they're well worth your time. You should go check out his channel right now. Go check out his videos. Also, if you want more frequent updates, I would recommend go check out his Twitter. He only does one video every couple months on YouTube, but if you want to follow Bob on Twitter, which I think you should, he not only covers crypto, he also talks about the stock market. He talks about precious metals, and he also just talks about general advice, right? Navigating the space, just like we've talked about today. So I would encourage everyone, definitely go subscribe to Bob. I think he's one of the best guys in the space. We're happy to have him here. Bob, you're welcome back anytime. I'd love to have you on later on this year so that we can do an update on where we are in the cycle.
Yeah, thanks very much, mate. I really appreciate it. It's really nice talking to you today. Wish you all the best. I wish all your listeners here all the best, and be well.
Thanks. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.